HMS Eskimo was one of the Royal Navy's tribal-class destroyers in the Second World War, and, despite many attempts to see her otherwise, she would also be one of the few survivors of the class by the end of that conflict. Eskimo began life in the Vickers Armstrong yards in August 1936 when her keel was laid down. Despite being a substantially larger destroyer than was typical for the Royal Navy at the time, she was launched almost exactly 1 year and 1 month later at the start of September 1937, although fitting her out took a little bit longer and she only commissioned at the very end of 1938. As a result, her peacetime career amounted essentially to working up herself and the crew before the Second World War kicked off, although in May 1939 she and 3 of her sister ships were part of 6th Destroyer Flotilla and went over to visit their French counterparts in Cherbourg. Along with the rest of 6th Destroyer Flotilla, she was then assigned to the Home Fleet and saw the opening stages of the Second World War, first guarding against a potential mass Kriegsmarine breakout, which failed to materialise, before the flotilla was split up and sent off to guard various convoys, during which time she received her first taste of enemy fire when the Luftwaffe bombed the convoy she was guarding. She was also present in Scapa Flow for the sinking of Royal Oak and the subsequent bombing of Iron Duke. In the latter case, Eskimo hauled alongside the old dreadnought to provide power until onboard systems aboard the battleship could be fixed. Although not deployed in the first wave of ships sent to Norway, Eskimo was dispatched shortly thereafter, joining HMS Warspite as part of the escort for the Third Battle of Narvik, which is sometimes called the Second Battle by those who ignore the last stand of Norge and Eidsvold. Towards the end of this battle, having already sunk the Hermann Kuhne, she chased 2 of the last German destroyers, Georg Thiel and Hans Ludemann, up a fjord and got a torpedo to the face for her troubles. This blew off the ship's bow as far back as B-mount, although this didn't seem to faze the crew all that much. Newly promoted to foremost gun position, B-mount's gunners kept firing as the ship swung about, launched a torpedo and unmasked its aft guns, with B-mount only ceasing fire when they ran out of ammunition. Eskimo then carefully backed out of the smaller fjord into the main one and reported for duty with 75% of her guns still effective, but was told to go home and get a new bow. This she did, refusing a tow but begrudgingly accepting an escort. This determination to hunt down the enemy aggressively, and come what may, stuck with the ship. With a new bow installed and X-turret replaced with a twin 4-inch for better anti-aircraft defence, she was back in action by September of 1940, once more with the Home Fleet. This lasted for about 6 months before she joined a commando raid on the Lofoten Islands, escorting the commandos in and capturing a German trawler which happened to be in the area, which allowed them to recover a set of Enigma rotors. She also periodically was assigned back to convoy duty, escorting at least 20 convoys over the course of the war. May 1941 saw her peripherally involved in the hunt for Bismarck as she and 2 other tribals were assigned to cover HMS Rodney and MV Britannic, an ocean liner that was being used as a high-speed transport. Rodney and the other 2 destroyers were called to pursue the German battleship, whilst Eskimo was left as the liner's sole escort, in which role she safely escorted the ship to port. This was followed by another refit to install numerous types of radar, after which she raided Lofoten again at the end of 1941, before starting 1942 riding escort for HMS Victorious in an unsuccessful attempt to slow down the retreating battleship Tirpitz. More radar and light anti-aircraft guns came her way that year, and the rest of it was spent mostly on convoy escort duty, including a stint in the Mediterranean where she took part in Operation Pedestal and a club run, a Spitfire delivery to Malta by HMS Furious. A brief stint back in the UK was followed by participation in Operation Torch, which was the start of a more prolonged stay in these warmer waters, attacking Axis convoys and taking part in Operation Retribution and Operation Husky, in which she was bombed heavily by German dive bombers, which sent her back to the UK at the end of summer to be patched up once again. She was then assigned to the 10th Destroyer Flotilla, which is where the Royal Navy concentrated the captains who, in peacetime, would probably have just been sectioned under the Mental Health Act, and in wartime were just pointed in the vague direction of the enemy and unleashed. She was in company with two of her sisters, Tartar and Ashanti, two near sisters, the Canadian Haida and Huron, and the Polish Piron and Bliskavica, plus HMS Javelin, who was along for the ride. This force deployed in June 1944 to provide cover for the D-Day landings, where a force including Eskimo encountered 4 German destroyers, sinking 2 and damaging the others as they fled. Eskimo herself was credited with the destruction of ZH-1, whilst the Canadians claimed Z-32. A couple of weeks later, she coordinated with Haida and a Czech-piloted Liberator bomber to sink U-971 before she collided with HMS Javelin at the start of July and lost her bow again. Whilst she was having extreme facial surgery for the second time, she was assigned to the Eastern Fleet, soon to be the British Pacific Fleet, and with a third bow in place, presumably with some quick-release clips for good measure, she set out for the Pacific via the Indian Ocean at the start of 1945. Here, she skirted the borders of the two oceans, mainly hunting down what was left of Japanese shipping in the area, wrapping up the war with some shore bombardment of holdout Japanese positions. Somewhat worn out, she was given enough of a refit to see her safely into the reserves, a status that she entered in February 1946, where she was used as an accommodation ship for the maintenance crews of the Medway Reserve. From here, she went on to be used in target trials on the Clyde in 1948, and was then sold for scrap in June 1949, the last of the surviving British tribal class. Her bell survives in the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich, whilst her pennant and crest can be found in a church in County Durham.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.